Lodge, and I want to talk to you about some really common tarot myths that people often believe that can often trip them up before they are even willing to start learning how to read tarot. And one of them is a biggie. Now, I call these my hated 8, only because there are 8 of them, and hate rhymes with 8, and I'm like that. The first one, like I said, is a biggie, so we're going to start with it right off the bat, and that is that you cannot buy yourself a tarot deck, that you must be gifted a tarot deck before you can start reading. And let me just say straight up, that is some bullshit. That is a ridiculous and horrible myth it came from, but I do know that my mother started reading tarot back in the 70s, late 60s. That myth was already really well known in the tarot community, but I have no idea where it came from, and that's probably because I've never bothered looking it up, because I just don't care. It's ridiculous, and that's silly. I mean, like, the myth also says that you're not allowed to ask for anyone to buy you a tarot deck, and you're not allowed to hint heavily either. So tarot being kind of like a weird thing that not everyone is aware of, it's kind of weird for someone to just kind of randomly buy you a tarot deck, and if they do, the odds of them picking one that you're going to want are pretty slim. So don't even worry about that. Just go buy yourself a tarot deck. Go to your favorite bookstore, buy it there, or buy it on Amazon or Kickstarter or Indiegogo or wherever you want to get it. That's totally fine. Just go for it. They're just ink and paper. In fact, I have another video about that. I think I called it something like, what makes tarot decks so magical? But I call it ink and paper. So just go buy yourself a tarot deck. It's totally cool. Also, if you love to receive flowers, go buy yourself some flowers. There's no rules about that either, so just go for it. The second myth that is not one of my favorites, another hated myth of mine, is that you're not allowed to ever use a used tarot deck, and that is also silly. Again, this is going to go back to ink and paper. They're just ink and paper. Now, if you don't like to use used items, period, then that should probably extend to tarot decks. That makes sense. You don't like other people's stuff. So it would hold true for tarot decks as well. If you don't mind having used furniture or used clothes or used whatever from other people, then that should hold true for tarot decks as well. I mean, but you can do your own thing there. But there's really no reason that tarot decks would be any different from any other physical object in your world at all. They're just physical objects. They hold energy the exact same way other physical objects do. So you can treat them the same way you do any other physical object in your life. If you're really worried about energy, you can clear, cleanse, and charge your tarot deck and then go on about your business just like any other physical object on the planet. So there's no reason to be afraid of used tarot decks. In fact, I have a couple of my mother's decks that have wonderful, amazing energy. My mother passed on when I was 16, and believe you me, I'm not going to be cleansing those decks because they still have my mother's energy, and I like that about them. But if I picked one up at a thrift store or something and I didn't like the energy of them for whatever reason, or I was just feeling territorial, I would clean those suckers and use them. No big deal. So yeah, just do whatever you want there. There's no hard and fast rule. That's something you get to decide on your own on a case-by-case basis. So just go for it and do what you like. The sacred container that you have to keep your tarot cards in. Now the tradition in the community is that you have to wrap your tarot cards in silk and keep them in a natural wood container. Now there are reasons that this myth is around, so I guess it's not really like a myth. It's kind of a practicality thing, but the myth is not as strict as people like to make it out to be. And it may just simply be a case of people don't understand the reasoning for the tradition and therefore take it to extremes, because that's kind of what people do. So I will give you the reasoning for it and then tell you what you should base your decisions on, and so you can make up your mind. Now, the reason people say decks in silk is organic material. It's also super soft, so it's not going to scratch up your cards. And the silk is especially, the fibers are believed to not transmit energy as well as other fabrics do and tend to block it. So whatever's happening around your cards is not going to affect the energy of your cards as well. It'll kind of insulate them from whatever's going on around them. But these days, it is no longer true that there are no faux silks. So it's not as guaranteed as it used to be, because once upon a time, there was no fake silk, and there is now. So it's not as reliable a bet as it used to be. Now, the wood container was pretty much the same thing. It was an all-natural container. Originally, you weren't supposed to have any stain or varnish on it, but that makes for an ugly wood box, so that went away pretty fast. Again, the idea is that the container was all natural, and thus it was less energetically porous, and it would protect your cards from energy and all that stuff, and keep it away from chemicals. Chemicals are considered toxic energy, but that's not really a belief that's as common anymore, because we now know that chemicals exist in all things in reality, so we're kind of a little more loosey-goosey about it. One thing that wood containers do have going for them is that they are hard, and keep your cards easy to get crushed, bent, or smashed by being dropped or having things dropped on them. In addition, I highly recommend that you keep your cards in a container, because they are 78 pieces of paper and ought to be contained when not being used, because there's wind and cats and children in the world, and you don't want to lose your cards. Containing them when you're not using them is typically a good idea. Now, there's a lot of alternatives to silk scarves in a wood container that you can use. I know women who use makeup bags, like, you know, go to Walgreens and buy a makeup bag for your makeup that will fit your cards, and that works great. They're an awesome alternative because you can put them in your purse. They're usually waterproof, which is great because paper isn't. And they look pretty harmless in your bag, and no one's going to want to look in your makeup bag in your purse, which is great. Especially if you're worried about, you know, people being weirded out by tarot cards. Another alternative, people love to use pouches, like cloth pouches and stuff. That's a great way to keep your tarot cards from wandering off. Not so great when it comes to water issues, but I'm not a big person who spills a ton of things anyway, and trust me, now I'm going to spill something later. But my trick is bottles and keeping the caps on them. That's how I solve that issue. So just, you know, use your own discretion. Tarot cards, your biggest concern when it comes to containing them is that they shouldn't wander off. At least that's my opinion. But again, use your own discretion. The next myth I'm going to talk about is that you should never allow somebody else to touch your tarot deck. This, again, is up to you. This is an energy management issue. Now, this is an issue you're going to have when it comes to all physical objects that you share. Anytime someone touches any physical object, they're going to leave a little bit of energetic residue on it. That's just, if you leave it energetic. If you're worried about this energetic transmission and like this germy cooties thing going on, you might want to be a little concerned about the rest of the physical objects in your life as well, like restaurant chairs and money, as well as your tarot cards. Just, you know, throwing that out there so you can be extra paranoid. Now, a little extra concern that people do have when it comes to tarot cards is that when you're using them, you're specifically opening up your energy, so you're making yourself more susceptible to other people, and that may or may not be true, but it's not a hard and fast rule, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. For me, when I'm doing a reading, I really want to get into other people's energies. I'm actually just using the cards as a doorway to access their energy, and that's how I'm able to do a reading. If I can't access their energy, it's harder for me to do a reading. So that's kind of an advantage for me when I'm conducting a reading. So I am not worried at all about sharing energy with my cards. If someone icky and nasty and horrible were to touch my cards, I would just cleanse them afterwards and call it all good. I don't need like a 3-month ritual to do so. It's a pretty simple process. There are literally like 8 million methods out there. Some of those methods involve water, and I would avoid those, again, going back to the paper issue. But really, it's not something you need to worry about. But again, They are your property, and if you don't want other people handling your property, that is totally up to you. You can make that choice if you want, but it's not a hard and fast rule. Everyone's allowed to make that decision for themselves. So experiment with it. If you don't know which way you feel good about it, experiment handing your cards to other people, and experiment not doing it. See which way feels nice to you, and go with your gut on that one. So it's your choice. It's just a choice. Choose what you like, not a hard and fast rule. And if people look down their nose at you, laugh in their face. Another rule is that you can never read for yourself. This is a silly rule again. Most of the rules are silly. There are no rules in tarot. If you go to my classes or have conversations at all with me ever, you're going to hear me say that a lot. There are no rules. None whatsoever. So yes, this one comes from the idea that people they're typically very biased, and when you're doing tarot readings, you're using a lot of your own judgment, your own intuition, and your own instincts to interpret the cards in the context that you're reading them. And when you're reading for yourself, a lot of times you're super biased, and you can't manage to interpret things in an unbiased way and give yourself an honest reading. That is something that you need to be aware of, but that doesn't mean that it can't be done. It just means you need to be aware of that issue. Some people do make that a personal rule for themselves, and that's their choice. You can choose not to do readings for yourselves, and that's totally fine. But it doesn't mean it can't be done. Our next myth is that you cannot ask yes or no questions. So this one's kind of sticky. It's a huge controversial topic in the tarot community. In my opinion, so we're going to start there. In my opinion, the tarot cards are not built. The system isn't really supportive of a yes-no question. The cards are more adapted towards giving you information about a topic. They're more suited to open-ended questions. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. Tarot cards can answer any question, and there's usually like a dozen different ways they could answer any question that you happen to have. There's pretty much nothing that the tarot cards can't do. People have figured out a way, and so there's a way to do pretty much everything out there. Genders, names, timelines, yes, no, maybes, anything you want to know, you can discover in tarot there. And if you have Google, there's a way to find it, or you can just make one up. That's totally fine too. You can really do anything. Some of it's going to take some trial and error, but it doesn't mean it can't be done, so just go for it. The next myth is that you have to memorize all the cards and their definitions before you can do a tarot reading. And that sounds horrible. Let's do some math. We're actually not going to do math because I suck at math, but I'm going to show you the kind of math we're going to have to do, and then we're not going to do it because that would be really hard. So, in the standard tarot system, there are 78 cards. If you look at the tarot booklet, and I'm going to show you a tarot booklet right here, for the King of Swords here in the little white booklet, this is what you're going to get in your standard tarot deck. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 keywords. So that's pretty standard for a tarot book, to just give you keywords for a card. And there's usually, 5 to 10 of them. So 78 cards with about 10 meanings to each of them gives you 780 different meanings for each card. So in order to memorize all the cards, you're going to need to memorize 780 different keywords. On top of that, if you read reversals, you're going to double that number. That's where I can't do the math. So it's going to be 780 times 2, which is a really, really big number. It's going to be upwards of 1,500. So you're going to have to remember 1,500 some odd keywords. Then you're going to have to choose which keywords are relevant based on which spread you're using, of which there are hundreds, and which position your card is in that particular spread. And most spreads have 3 to 5 positions. So like 1,500 times 100 times 5, that's a really, really big number. So those are the number of meanings you're going to have to memorize, plus the iterations of questions that people are going to ask. That's an absurd number. So no, you don't have to memorize that many interpretations of a card. That would be ridiculous. You can start doing readings just straight out of the gate. Like literally buy a deck day one and start throwing some cards. Grab your little book and, you know, just map it out and practice at it. Eventually, what you'll do is you'll develop your own association with the cards if you want. There are also systematic ways of learning the cards. So you take, so this is the Knight of Cups. So all knights mean, let's say, teenagers. These are people between the ages of 13 and 20. And cups are the element of water. So these are sensitive young people who are not really great about judgment. So we put those elements together, read it in context of the question and in our spread, and we go from there. So it's kind of an associative system instead of a keyword-based system, or you can read totally intuitively. So instead of just reading it based on, you know, the number and the element, or the keywords, you look at what the illustration is saying. So here we have a bunch of unicorns leaping for joy on the Four of Wands. So you might interpret this card as a card of celebration, which would be totally correct. So you can do it. There's a whole bunch of different ways to interpret the cards. Whatever system works for you, works for you. Try them all out. Screw them all up. It'll be great. It'll be fun. There's no right way to do it. You don't have to memorize everything that's horrible and awful and absurd. And if someone told you that, I'm really, really sorry. Don't listen to them. The last one is that you have to be a master before you can read for other people, or heaven forbid, be paid for your readings or be a professional. I don't even know. There was this discussion recently in a Facebook group I'm in on Facebook, clearly, with over 20,000 members in it, where people were discussing how long you needed to study tarot before you could do tarot readings professionally, and someone said that they had been studying tarot for 17 years and they were not expert enough to do professional tarot readings. And I just thought, holy crap, man, how long do you have to study? Like, that's absurd. You can fix cars and those kill people in less time. I mean, that's ridiculous. So yeah, how many years? I mean, when tarot cards were our first documented record of people using tarot cards were in the 1400s, and people lived to be like 30. So, I mean, how many years of study could you really put in before you became a professional? I mean, you would be dead. That's absurd. And also, you couldn't read, so that makes it really hard. There was no internet for sure. So expecting someone to have 25 years of hard study before they can become a professional is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I think once you have a grip on ethics and a pretty good sense of what you're doing, like, as long as you feel good about it, go for it. And be responsible, don't be a jerk and don't scam people, but, I mean, who gets to decide what a master is? I mean, there's so many variables involved in that whole concept that it's ridiculous. There's no professional association to police us, and thank goodness for that, because some of these people have ridiculous ideas. I mean, just go be responsible and ethical, but do your thing. Like, go out there and do it, and don't worry about what people are going to say. Like, connect with people who are supportive and help you grow, and not people who shame you. Always seek to expand your boundaries, and always seek to grow, because you're a human being, and that's what you're supposed to do. Also, that's my opinion. But go forth and do good in the world, and don't worry too much about what other people are saying. People are scared, and they have issues, and they're competitive, but be a master. That is a meaningless sentence, so don't even pay any attention to it. You do not have to be. I don't even know what a master is. That's absurd. Yeah, that is ridiculous. I don't even know if I'm a master, and I've been at this for a stupid long time, and I feel pretty good about it. So yeah, those are some myths. Tarot is not